So originally, this video was meant to go a little bit like this.
Hey everyone. So recently I dug up a scary story that I wrote when I was about 10 and didn't speak English that well, and I had my actor friend Sam Barlien do a serious dramatic reading of it. Now, I have maybe 10 more stories from this time period on my desktop, so if you'd be interested in hearing more of them, give me a shout down in the comments below. Enjoy!
Yet, as I listened to this interesting recording, I realized that there is something more that I want to do with it. Over the past year and a bit, I've been posting up narrated versions of my short horror stories with the help of local actors and the occasional internet denizen. Whilst I really enjoy doing this, I've always been looking for a way to interact with the audience a bit more and possibly talk about the craft of writing. I reckon this Dusty story by prepubescent me could be a decent jumping off point for both of those things. So, this video comes to you in 3 parts. Part 1. Spooky story about ice cream written by a literal child and read by a talented actor. Part 2. How to approach a bad first draft. Part 3. Vote on how I should rewrite the story written by a literal child. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, and if you want to help spread the word about my channel, make sure you call up your ex at 3 AM and tell them you missed them. Tell them you've changed. Tell them you've grown into a stable adult who is willing to be emotionally vulnerable with another person. And then, as you both weep for love that has died and cannot be resurrected, tell them to subscribe to Mike Jesus Langer on YouTube and hang up! Anywho, here's Sam with the fever dream of an Eastern European child.
"One chocolate, please," I said. It was a warm and sunny day, and I was buying ice cream from my favorite ice cream man, Mr. Mabino. He was a short man with almost no hair, and he smiled all the time. I loved his ice cream. His chocolate ice cream. It was so delicious. He was the best and the only ice cream man who was selling in the village. The only problem was, he lived far away in the city, but that was no problem for him, because he had a van that he used to sell his ice cream on. So that was the end of the day for me. The next day, I was waiting for the ice cream truck, but it was late. So I waited and waited. Maybe he crashed, or got sick. So I was about to go home, but as I went, I heard a familiar sound. "Yes!" I yelled. It was the ice cream truck music. All the kids ran out of their houses, but as the truck went closer, I noticed it wasn't Mr. Mabino who was driving. It wasn't him at all. The guy who was driving it had straight black hair and was smiling. It wasn't his truck, too. It was a different one. It had bats and ghosts on it. Cool. It must be his assistant or something. But Mr. Mabino wasn't there. So I asked the guy, "Where is Mr. Mabino?" "Well, he's sick," the guy said. So, as normally, everyone bought ice cream. It was about 11 o'clock, and I was sitting in my bed trying to sleep, but I just wasn't sleepy. I stood up and went outside. I tried to go back, but I just couldn't. My legs couldn't move. In the dark, I saw a figure standing in front of me. It was about 16 feet away from me. I was trying to scream, but no sound came out. In the moonlight, I saw another terrified face. I saw my best friend, Jeff. I never saw him this way. He was so pale. From the darkness, a sound came out. It sounded familiar. It sounded like ice cream truck music. Oh no. I'm doomed if the guy sees me. He'll tell my parents. Still, I couldn't move. But when I saw the ice cream truck, I had other things to worry about. The ice cream truck didn't look normal. It was glowing green. And the guy who was driving had a kid's doll in his left arm. But instead of hair, it had little fingers. Bleeding fingers. I have to get out of here, I thought, but I couldn't move. As the ice cream man was getting closer, I started to walk, but not to my house, to the truck. I tried to escape, but my legs just did not obey me. I noticed that Jeff is coming too. Then I noticed another figure beside me, and another, and another. Every child in the whole village was going with him. We went like this to the edge of the village. Then we stopped the guy and opened the truck. And as I looked into the truck, I almost fainted. Bodies. Bodies of kids. There was blood all over the van. The guy took a stick and hit one of the bodies right in the heart, and on the stick, there it was, still pumping blood. He handed it to me. My hand slowly raised, and the heart was in my mouth, still pumping in my mouth. The next day I woke up. As fast as I went to my mom and dad, I told them all about what happened last night, but who would believe a story like that? So I tried to talk to Jeff, but when I was about to speak about the ice cream man, I couldn't say a word. What happened? I thought. Maybe I just imagined it. So I went to lunch. I was really hungry, and so I took a giant lunch, but still I was hungry. Very hungry. It was about 4 o'clock, and I heard it again. The ice cream truck song. God, no, better hide, I was thinking, but I couldn't run because of my stomach. I fell on the floor with pain. This could not be happening. I have to get up. Or else, he's gonna catch me. In a few seconds, I saw him stopping in front of me. He opened his van slowly. All the kids suddenly appeared. They took the ice cream each, but for free, but I noticed they're not holding, not ice cream, not it at all. There were hearts, like last night, but in a second or two I got a strange feeling and my heart began to beat rapidly. It felt like that it was going to explode. I felt hungrier and hungrier. Every second saliva dropped from my mouth. I need ice cream, a husky voice inside me said, and I couldn't resist it. It looked so delicious. Well, that's what I thought. I ran to the ice cream van and I took a hearth. The taste gave me joy, and I wasn't hungry anymore. The truck went away. Then I noticed something horrible. I wasn't myself anymore. I was just skin and bones. How could this happen? I tried to run home, but I could not run. The only thing I could do was just to walk, slowly. Suddenly, the joy left me. I didn't have any happiness. I got home and found a package. It said that it was for me, but no name from who sent it. Well, better open it. It can't get worse than this. So I opened it. No letter, just some kind of amulet. What's this junk doing here? I said. I was about to throw it away, but if someone gave it to me, I better put it on. I put it on, and I got another feeling of joy. A stronger one. The strongest one ever. I looked at my hand. I was back to normal. So I went outside, happy that everything had ended. Outside, I saw an old woman that was laying on the ground. I ran to her. Maybe she's hurt and she needs help, so I picked her up. She thanked me and saw the amulet. She told me that it protects me from evil. She went away without saying goodbye. Well, I might try it on that guy. Well, he sure is evil. That night, I put the amulet on my neck, prepared to go and get that guy. I heard the music and ran outside by myself. I saw him coming, so I followed him with the rest of the kids. He still had that weird doll. I was prepared to destroy him. We got to the edge of the city. He was giving the hearts to the kids again. I sneaked inside the ice cream truck, into the driver's room. I see my dad do this 100 times. It should be easy. I went backwards with the car, right where the guy was. I heard a bump on the car. I got him. I ran outside and looked. I could see his feet from under the van. Yes, I got him. But then, the van flew away, and the guy was standing in front of me. He looked really angry. I took a sharp stick from the ground. I smacked him with it. He caught it in the air and threw me on the ground. He looked even angrier. I kicked him in the leg. His eyes blazed with anger. They were red. All of a sudden, his skin started ripping. He was not a human. For sure, he was made out of humans. He was 6 times bigger than a normal human. He had 1 eye, 8 arms, and no legs. He was giant, and he didn't look happy. Then his mouth opened. It was all over his body. He tried to bite me, but I ducked just in time. I had to think quickly. I ran to the ice cream truck. He opened his mouth and ate it. Then he started getting skinny. He fell into a river and sank. The next day, I woke up. There was a lot of children looking at me and thanking me for saving them. Well, from this moment, I do not eat ice cream.
So, first draft. If there's one thing I've learned throughout my writing career, it's that getting some distance between you and your work is key to a smooth editing process. Working with abstract concepts like narratives and themes is hard enough on its own, but it's significantly harder when your ego is involved. If you feel like the piece that's slated for editing is destined to justify your existence as a hairless monkey on this dying rock, give it a couple more weeks to ferment in the back of your head. It's easier to criticize and gut text that doesn't feel like an inherent part of our identity. Once you have enough distance between you and the writing that you did, I recommend boiling down the story into its basic dramatic movements. Where does it start? Where does it end? What's it about? Chuck together a quick summary so you know what you are working with. For Ice Cream, the division is fairly straightforward. Part 1. Introduction. We introduced Ice Cream Man, Mr. Mobino, and established the fact that our protagonist really loves his ice cream. Part 2. Change in the status quo. One day, Mr. Mobino doesn't show up to sell his ice cream. Instead, he is replaced by a dark-haired man in a spooky truck. Aside from the switch-up, the day continues as usual, but our protagonist is troubled by the sudden replacement of his favorite ice cream man. Is Mr. Mobino truly just taking a sick day? Or is there something more nefarious afoot? Part 3. The Pied Piper Ice Cream Man. In the middle of the night, our protagonist wakes up and feels the need to go outside. Turns out, he's not the only one. The rest of the children of the village have also gathered outside. They have all been possessed by the frozen treats they ate during the day. Soon enough, the corrupted ice cream man shows up and leads the children to the edge of the forest. There, he forces them to partake in a cannibalistic ritual against their will. Part 4. In Search of Help. Our protagonist wakes up from his horrid experience. Something is wrong and he seeks help. Yet, when he goes to tell his parents, they don't believe him. In an even more troubling turn of events, when he tries to discuss what happened the night prior with his friends, he finds out he is unable to speak. Part 5. Transformation. Our protagonist takes a big lunch, but it does not satiate him. He gorges on food to the point of sickness, yet still his appetite is relentless. To make things even worse, when the corrupted ice cream man shows up again, our hero is unable to resist his call. He is forced to partake in a cannibalistic ritual once more. His hunger is finally satiated, but he pays a mighty price for it. The boy's body turns frail and powerless. Part 6. Supernatural Aid. Someone randomly sends the boy an amulet in the mail. He puts it on and he feels joy. Then he goes outside and finds an old woman lying on the street. She can't get up, so he helps her up. She thanks him and tells him that the amulet wards off evil. Our hero is weak and drained from the dark ritual he was forced to partake in. Yet, because of the goodness of his heart, when he sees an old crone fallen on the street, he lends her aid. In return for his kind deed, the old woman gives him a magical amulet that protects the boy from evil magic. This amulet can help the boy against the corrupted ice cream man, because the ice cream man sure is evil. Part 7. Battle against evil. Wearing the amulet, our hero is able to resist the call of the ice cream man, yet, because of the goodness of his heart, he still joins the other children as they walk to the edge of the forest. Instead of indulging in the cannibalistic ritual of the night prior, however, our protagonist sneaks into the truck and runs down the corrupted ice cream man in an effort to bring an end to his evil doings. Our hero celebrates his victory over the forces of evil, yet his celebrations are short-lived. The corrupted ice cream man rises up again, but not as a mere mortal. He towers above the children as an eldritch abomination with 1 eye, 8 arms, and no legs. Our child protagonist is no match for this towering monster, yet, with the help of his wits, he manages to trick the many-limbed beast into consuming the true source of its power, the spooky ice cream truck. Part 8. Resolution. Our hero wakes up after his battle with the forces of evil. The village children crowd around him and thank him for freeing them from the corrupted ice cream man's grasp. Our protagonist leaves us with the lesson he has learned from his dangerous journey.
From this moment, I do not eat ice cream.
The summary isn't necessarily an accurate representation of the source text, but it doesn't have to be. The point of breaking down the story into bullet points is less about chastising yourself about the scenes where you jumble the plot, and more about figuring out how a functional version of your story would look. It's not Ibsen, but if I had to rewrite the story from scratch, I reckon those 8 points would make for passable scaffolding. If the goal is to replicate the plot of the story, then breaking down the first draft into manageable chunks should push you along the way. But what if you're not trying to rewrite the story beat by beat? What if the story you wrote has a garbage plot that you don't care about? Or, even worse, what if you never finished off the story and it's been sitting in your drawer for months as a cruel reminder of time wasted? Fear not, friend. Dealing with the first draft isn't always a cause for a rewrite. Sometimes what you need is just a good old salvage operation. Aside from the obvious language and pacing issues, this story, and a fair amount of the amateur writing that scrolls across my newsfeed, suffers from a somewhat simple problem. Too much stuff. In just 9 minutes, we are introduced to a slew of concepts that make the story feel really crowded and mighty half-baked. Mr. Mobino, mind control, cannibalism, magical amulets, eldritch creatures, dolls made of human fingers, cursed ice cream salesman, the Pied Piper archetype, best friend Jeff, wise old woman, forced gorging on food, paralysis, inability to speak about specific traumas, childhood treats gone awry, one-eyed monsters. It's a lot, especially for 3 pages of text. When faced with an overcrowded story, it's a good idea to jump in and figure out which of these concepts you actually want to write about. Ask yourself, what made me want to write this story to begin with? Or, if the original idea doesn't have particularly strong sea legs, is there anything within the story that jumps out at me as salvageable? I can't really speak to the motivations of 10-year-old Mike. All I know is he probably wrote this story sipping on an ecto cooler with Dorito dust on his fingers, but reading this story as an adult, there's 2 particular concepts that jump out at me. The transformation of the cheery Mr. Mobino into the corrupted ice cream man, and the concept of selective muteness when speaking about childhood trauma. There's a bunch of stuff that could be done with either of these concepts. Horror centered around the corruption of an innocent man's body is pretty solid material to work with. Is not all flesh corrupted by nature against its will? Is the ever-present specter of disease, both physical and mental, not something that keeps us up at night? Can man ever truly come to peace with the fact that each flicker of life is destined to be snuffed out by earth and rot? Stories that revolve around human fragility, be it mental, physical, or moral, stick with us because they center on an unavoidable truth. The human condition is inherently fragile. Everything that's alive is inherently fragile. Seeing a friendly adult face from the neighborhood slowly transform into something corrupted and evil, especially from the perspective of a child, makes for some potent horror imagery. And, on the note of children, even though it's a small part of the story, I really dig the idea of our protagonist not being able to put into words the horror of the cannibalistic ritual he was forced to partake in. The powerlessness of being a child combined with the inability to tell the outside world that something is horribly wrong is some grade A nightmare fuel. Once upon a time, we were all kids. We all know what it's like to be small and scared. Weak, yet relatable characters make for good horror protagonists. When we're rooting for the little girl to get away from the axe murderer, we're not just invested because she is a child who's in danger. We're invested because we too were once children whose carefree worlds were invaded by the cruel specter of reality. We're invested because deep inside, we think we can change the past. And that's some mighty fine baggage to take with you on a spooky trip. So, we have a beat-by-beat breakdown of the story and 2 fairly straightforward concepts that could be spun into a narrative. How do we choose which thread we follow? Personally, when I am reasonably confident that I can write all three, I tend to choose my second favorite. There's not much value in writing something I'm not interested in, hence disqualifying the runt of the litter, but I also like to put off my favorite pieces for a later date. More practice makes you a better writer. If I'm going to tackle a story I really care about, then I'd like to be in the best possible shape to handle it. Nothing scrapes the ego more than tackling a story that you care about but don't have the skill set to do justice to. So, if you're a fledgling pen monkey and you're trying to figure out what story to write, I'd recommend doing that. Work your way up to your darlings. Let them be the untouched beacons of light that you look up to as you cut your teeth in the murky waters of manageable narrative. Which of these three am I going to work on? Well, that brings us to Part 3. Vote on how I rewrite this story written by a literal child. I've been working on the same set of stories for the past 4 months, and even though they're really close to being release ready, I would like to take a quick break and work on something lighter for a couple of days. Rewriting Ice Cream feels like a nice change of pace, and, as I said before, I'd like to interact with the audience a bit more. So, humble viewer/listener, I leave it up to you. Should I A. Rewrite the story beat by beat, B. Rewrite the story focusing on Mr. Mobino's transformation, or C. Rewrite the story focusing on the protagonist's inability to speak about the dark ritual? Vote down in the comments below and let me know. If there's also any other aspect of writing pulp horror you would like me to ramble about, give me a shout. Well, that's me. Looking forward to stalking that comment section and wishing y'all a pleasant Friday evening. Hope everyone is safe, sane, and healthy out there.